Do you mind waving people in back there? Thanks. So we have, Bert is going to be chairing the next few sessions, and then Matthew will take over for the last bit. I think there's always different people in the room, and I just want to be clear. So tonight, you'll catch the bus at your hotel or in front of the Maritime Museum at 6:15, and you're going to bring with you some passport or a driver's license, something with your photo. They won't likely ask, but if I don't say this, if I don't stress it, then they will definitely ask. I think there are a couple of people who have indicated that they are very close to the destination and will walk. So same thing, you won't be able to enter the base unless you have your identification. And I believe they may also require us to wear a mask when we're moving through the elevators, when we're not in the dining area or the reception space. So if you have a mask to bring with you for those instances when we're moving through the spaces, that would be good. And again, we're going to end today around 3. And there are it's basically free time, but we have some options for you if you'd like to join. There'll be a bus that will take people for about an hour for a naval themed tour. Again, if you're going to do that one, you may need to have photo ID on you. So if you don't have that, don't choose that one. The Citadel is a really great tour as well, and so that's an option. So there's buses for those two items or 2 activities. There's also, if you haven't had a chance to see the Maritime Museum in the Atlantic, this is a good time to go there, and you have free admission, of course, for that. And Dan Conlon will be here to give folks an overview of the museum here at Pier 21. He'll probably spend about half hour taking you through things and he's a great tour guide if that's of interest, and you'll have some time to explore. So we don't want to fill you up with too much stuff at that time of the day, because I imagine you'll want to get to your hotels and to get ready. Dress as nice as you want. This is our 50th anniversary, for goodness sakes. So there's no expectation of suits and ties, but if you want to wear your whatever, you can wear whatever. It's not very clear. Any questions about any of that? Everyone's good? I know there's some partners here who are going off on a tour with Joni. Joni's here, and I think your bus is leaving at 1:45, so she'll be out there probably around 1:30, collecting everyone, seeing who she has. And when you are done your tour at the shipyard, she'll take you back, or the bus will take you back to your hotels. Okay? All good? I'm going to hand it over to Bert.
Thank you, Kim, for getting everybody in on time. That's very nice. It is time for the next 3 speakers, and in my role as the treasurer of ICMM, I feel it's a duty for us to that all our members will have a value for their money. And I think the Congress was very good value for money. We were sharing and discussing ideas and visions. We were sharing good practice, but also mistakes. And through the newsletters, through the network, and through this annual Congress, I think it proves the value of ICMM. And now we are coming towards the final session, the grand final. And we are enjoying a full program and intense. And to me, it feels a little bit like running a marathon. And as the runners among us know, the final miles or kilometers of a marathon cost some extra effort. But then again, there are also the ones you will remember the most at the end. So the next 3 inspiring speakers will get you on your way to the finish. Today is about vessel preservation, important and costly. In Rotterdam, we have about 1 million objects inside and 41 outside. But these 41 outside are more costly to maintain and to operate than the million. So there's a big difference. And So thank you, Liverpool, for the kind offer for the water, but we're not going to take it. Operating ships or not operating ships. And for example, at the moment we struggle with a discussion, maintain the steam engines of a tugboat or replace it with electric or add on electric. So these are all discussions we play around in many museums. Time for the presentations. The first speaker is Andrew Baines. And Andrew is the Deputy Director of Museums Operations at the National Museum of the Royal Navy. After graduating from University of Portsmouth, he developed a career in the care of 4 historic ships. And he's going to tell us about the decade-long, £35 million project to conserve the HMS Victory for the next 50 years. Please welcome Andrew Baines.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to start by thanking everybody over the past day who's come up to me and said, on after lunch, that's not a good gig, is it? End of a long week, everybody's tired, we've had a high-protein lunch, and you're on. I'll also thank those who didn't go with that, but did go with the bit intimidating, isn't it, after the quality of the speakers we've had this morning, mentioning no names, of course. So if you heard, I work for the National Museum of the Royal Navy. I am responsible for a historic collection of 16 ships. It strikes me after this morning that maybe I should have retitled this NMRN, Are We Crazy? But I suspect you'd have all had an already formed answer on that. The National Museum of the Royal Navy assumed responsibility for HMS Victory 10 years ago now, stepping into what was effectively a 180-year-old project at that time. So I just want to spend a little bit of time today talking about how we've approached that project over the past 10 years and where the next 10 years are taking us. Right, so this is Victory. Actually, that's not Victory. I should have taken that slide out. This is Victory now, because just before we took the ship, the Navy realised that the ship's rig was going to come down over the winter, whether it was done by a crane or whether it was done by nature, and so removed the masts, as a consequence of which, every time I come somewhere like this, the first and often only question I get asked is, when are you putting the masts back? When are the masts going back? Well, over the past 10 years, the National Museum has spent £15 million, and we have managed to deliver this. And I can tell that you are staggered by the degree of progress we've made in those 10 years. We've taken a mast away and we've painted it pink, if you believe what the press says. So 10 years ago, when Victory was handed to us, we had good data. We knew that rainwater was pouring into the ship. That was causing rot throughout the ship's structure, and it was leaving Victory naked, if you like, to the ravages of insect infestation, especially deathwatch beetle. We had local movement of timber. The 33,000 individual elements that comprise Victory were all moving because all the fixings that held them together originally had been removed and either not replaced at all or replaced with smaller fixings that weren't really up to the job. And we had movement of the ship's structure. Victory was collapsing down on herself at a rate of about ½ a centimetre a year and had been doing for 40 years. She was bulging at the waterline at a similar rate. The whole ship was falling backwards away from the bowsprit, and she was rotating about her centreline, falling over in dock. Although the data on that wasn't conclusive, and it may have been that the dock was falling over. Either way, it was not a good place to be. So we accepted the ship, which came with a dowry of £55 million all told, and we developed this brief, which was actually developed by Martin Heighton when he was Chair of National Historic Ships UK. And that was to deliver a fully conserved HMS Victory in a condition to survive outside for a period of 50 years without major work beyond a programme of planned maintenance. There's a number of get-out-of-jail-free cards in that scope of work, isn't there? We won't touch on it. The challenge we had is that the Navy had estimated we needed to spend about £100 million over the following 20 years. And a ship conservation project in its early days is a veritable smorgasbord of options, I always think. And as one sits at the table and watches a lazy Susan go around, it's always easiest to pick what's closest to you or what is most appetizing at the time. And that is a very good route to making sure that you've no money left at the end of your project, and you've probably no project left at the end of your project because things have gone badly wrong. So we knew that this was likely to be the last chance to deliver a project that protected Victory's significance. And that really has been the goal throughout. Make sure you're protecting what is important about the ship. So the first decision the board made was to work to those National Historic Ships UK guidelines that we've talked about earlier on, that our first task would be to stabilise, stop things getting any worse than they already were. We had to improve our understanding of Victory. We had to assess significance, really decide what were the things that made the ship important and which parts of the ship were the most important. We then had to plan and implement that conservation project, and then make good on the boring bit that funders are never terribly excited about in our experience, and that is maintenance. Well, if you're not going to do that, you may as well not bother with anything. So that's the process we took on. In terms of stabilisation, relatively straightforward. We could caulk the decks. We spend a lot of time raking out the seams in the hull planking, filling them and painting them in a stopgap measure. But in terms of protecting what was significant, that's difficult in 2012 because, it sounds strange to say, we don't know what's significant about Victory. We knew a lot about what the ship had done, but we didn't know a lot about what had been done to her. So going back to October 21st, she's gone through 1805, she's gone through this enormous battle. She's badly damaged, she's lost her rig, there's 92 shot holes between wind and water on the starboard side alone. The Navy, not sentimental at all that Nelson's been breathing his last, brings her back to Portsmouth. 10,000 quid later, she's good to go to sea. She carries on for another 4 years at sea. 1812 gets into Portsmouth for the last time under her own power, and between 1814 and 1816 she's taken through a major repair, a huge rebuild. Again, no sentimentality at all. The ship's damaged, she needs bringing up to scratch. The Navy is quite rational about things. The ship continues through the 19th century looking like this. She's been heavily modified in that 1814-16 rebuild. The front end of the ship is brand new, making use of all the lessons of the Napoleonic and French Revolutionary Wars. And the Navy actually decides in the 1830s they don't need a 100-gun ship. They're going to cut her down and they're going to make her a 74. Public outcry. You cannot possibly do this to Victory. A press campaign is run and the Navy relents, which is very good news for me because it means I can now pay a mortgage and get to come to Halifax to talk to you good folks. But it does leave us with some received wisdom and some hang-ups that still kind of dog our project today. Victory goes through the rest of the 19th century, not terribly well maintained. In 1903, she's rammed by HMS Neptune, nearly sinks at her moorings in emergency dry docking is gone through. There's a big fanfare for the centenary. And then in 1922, she's placed permanently into number 2 dock in Portsmouth Harbour. And the Navy and the Society for Nautical Research spend 6 years restoring her to her Trafalgar condition, that concept that had first reared its ugly head 90 years previously. And even at the time, there's some doubters saying, well, hang on a minute here. If we'd been appointed to care for Westminster Abbey, we wouldn't be demolishing Henry VII's chapel because it doesn't date to the original build period. Should we really be doing this? To which the Navy's answer was, yeah, absolutely, it's great, look at it, it's Trafalgar, that's the important thing. It's that point Paddy touched on with that painting earlier of the National Maritime Museum on Wednesday morning. It's about holding up Nelson and Trafalgar as an example to our young men of the time. He's very much the driver behind the conservation. But nobody wants to spend any money on maintenance. So not a lot's done. We're taking 16,000 Death Watch beetles a year out of Victory by 1947. One Death Watch beetle, we think, eats about 3 cubic centimetres of oak in its lifetime, so you can see we're losing a lot of material every year. So that by 1965, there's little option but to take on a massive project to effectively reconstruct the ship. All of the hull planking above the waterline and the vast majority of the ship's frames are ripped out, whether they need it or not, and replaced. And this really is the source of the project that we are grappling with today. Victory's problems do not stem from material that has been in the ship's hull 250 years, or 150 years, or even 75 years. Our problems to do with that material that was placed into the ship in the last 60 years or so. So I say we know what had happened, but we didn't know how that had impacted the ship. So in terms of being able to assess significance and understand the structure, we had to move towards a process of improving our understanding. We looked at the race marks, the shipwrights marks throughout Victory, 700 of these that very helpfully frequently give us a date in which the timber was brought into the yard or put into the ship. Sometimes they just say, you know, kind of insert tab A into slot B, but roughly a fifth of the time they're more helpful than that. Secondly, we took on paint analysis, and I could do an hour and 15 minutes on paint analysis, let alone 15 seconds in a talk. And this is looking at all the painted surfaces we have through the ship, sampling them, getting back to the original layers of paint that were put in 1760 or 1803 or 1815 as it might be, and using that information to help us understand what is left in Victory and when that dates from. It also allows us, as I alluded to earlier, to paint Victory pink. We have had more correspondence on this than even the masts. There are a lot of model makers who are extremely angry with me, and still 6 years on, there's hardly a week goes by I don't get an email bemoaning what we did and seeking to have it returned to as it was before. And finally, we undertook dendrochronology to understand tree ring dating in very specific instances. And that allowed us to form an overall view in terms of Victory to roughly what parts of the ship date to when. It's not at element level. We are working on that, and we work through that planning before any specific work's done, but a broad brush picture so we can understand what's significant. We also had to do a shipwright survey, walk around with a knife, shove it in a piece of timber. If it goes in, that's bad. If it doesn't, that's good. We like that. And we then undertook a program of structural analysis, 89.25 billion measurements taken of Victory to allow us to produce a structural model for analysis and one for reference also. And that confirmed that our problems weren't really to do with rot, is from a point of preserving significance, but not from a point of structural integrity, nor was it to do with all those missing fixings. The big problem we had was the way the ship was supported in dock. So we had to put on a new support system, replacing the supports, the existing 22 cradles with 134 props. That allowed us to get access into the dock. We then had to go through our assessing significance, understanding why the ship's important and the many ways in which it is, understanding the threats that the ship faces, and not being sentimental about this, but being really hard-hearted and hard-headed around what is important, what must we protect. We then had to go through the planning stages, which involved a lot of work. This is not... Sorry, I've skipped anyway. This is not a shipwright project. It's not an engineering project. It's not a naval architect's project. It's not an archaeological project. It's strands of those, and we've got to bring them all together into this plan, which will take us through 10 years. We're starting in the middle, because that's where we're losing the most significant material, and then addressing the ends. And to give you an indication of the problems we have, this is a photo of the kind of rot we've got in the hull. This is that hull being opened up. That's the problem we've got. On the right-hand side is the teak planking. The bit you see, that looks great. On the left-hand side, the ship's frames with the screw head. In between, where there should be planking, nothing. This planking dates to 1994. or I should say this compost dates to 1994. So in summary, a rational approach, what does that mean? Well, for us, it is absolutely fundamentally about significance guiding decisions, not sentimentality. We've got to be rational about that. It's engaging as widely as possible. So in the process of writing the Conservation Management Plan, we talked to as many people as we could about the challenges they faced. The projects are very rarely the same, but the challenges faced are, and the approaches to dealing with them can be useful. That's why we come to places like this. Don't pigeonhole the project. As I say, it's not one thing. It's not engineering, it's not shipwright, it's not conservation, it's not archaeology. It's a blend of those. Specific projects, those areas will be blended in different ways. And finally, evaluate and reflect. We are going through a mid-course correction on the project at the minute, helped by our president and his future guys as chair of the Victory Technical Committee. And we're really looking at where has the guidance helped us over the past 10 years and where has it not been as good as we should have been. So thank you very much. I galloped through.
Thank you, Andrew. It is a major challenge. The MH victory tells an important story, and it's worth all the efforts you put in. And of course, we always look forward when you're putting the mast back again.